What I want to talk about today is something which I'm sure is very dear to all of us and something most of us struggle with either now or at some point in our lives. And we see it mentioned a lot in the press these days. And it's about identity. Now, and when I say we struggle with it, it's something with me. I've always thought, who the hell am I? What am I supposed to do? What am I here for? Why am I here? Who am I? And it's a huge, huge question. And other people use identity as a weapon and they say, I identify as, and I'm making this statement and I'm challenging you to say otherwise. It's a funny stance to take when people do that, when they go, I challenge you to say that I'm not who I identify as. Me, I couldn't care less who somebody identifies as. That is an issue purely for them. If they want to identify as a giraffe, that's fine. Just don't expect me to look at them and go, oh, look, there's a giraffe. But if that's how you see yourself, as a tall, somewhat ungainly creature covered in spots, then that's fine. That's your reality. And you're perfectly legally entitled to live within that reality. Now, I'm talking about identity because I have struggled, as I said, with who I am, what I'm here for, and what's my purpose. Now, when I was younger, I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be a doctor. Neither of those things happened. I was shit at maths. That's the reality of it. Also, I have ADHD, so as I went back and did my maths, it was more a matter of understanding rather than a lack of ability, as I later found out. But I'm digressing. Identity. So I joined the army and I identified as a soldier. Although, as my daughter pointed out the other day, she said, but you were just a cook, Dad. I said, yeah, but I was still in the army. I still served. I was still prepared to fight if need be. I would have gone into battle had I been called to do so. That's why you put on the uniform. I was a soldier. No, you were a cook. So I was in fact both, but I identified primarily as being in the army. And that is what my perception of it was. My daughter's perception of me was very, very different. And it's not like I was trying to steal any valour by saying so. I'm just proud of having served my country. And then from the army, I joined the police and I was a police officer and I did various roles within that. But what struck me was I never really identified strongly as a soldier because I left the army after 10 years of service, because it wasn't really me. It wasn't really where I saw myself going, and I didn't want 10 more years of that. And I joined the police because it seemed like a good idea, not because I had any burning desire to be a police officer. The only burning desire I have is to help people. And then I've done various other jobs, all of which have been in some manner or another serving people and helping people. That is my primary motivation. So if you ask me what my identity is, it's somebody who helps people. But recently, I've added another dimension to that. Although I was originally baptised as a Christian in the Catholic faith, I moved away from that. And God was just something there in the background. I never stopped believing in God, I never stopped believing in Jesus, but it was just in the background. I wasn't practicing my faith. So this year I got called back to faith. I got called to follow Jesus, in my view. And that gave me a whole new identity. I identify as a Christian. Now, that doesn't mean that suddenly I'm right about everything. That doesn't mean that suddenly I'm the most empathetic, wonderful, caring person, because I know I'm not. What I do know, however, is that I'm on a road I wish to be on. It's a road I wish to follow. And down that road, it's a road of constant improvement. So my identity is as a Christian, but in order to be a Christian, I need to understand what it is to be a Christian and how to live in the way that Jesus wanted us to. And I've mentioned before, love the Lord our God. I look around, I look at nature. That bit's easy. I look at what's been created. Marvellous. I'm a Christian. I appreciate God. I appreciate nature. But what's so much harder to do is loving thy neighbour. And that is what the journey is about. That's what the identity is about. Now, I look at other people out there, especially in politics, who may identify as Christians. And my view is they're anything but. Now, it's easy to say, I'm a Christian, and put your foot on that path. But for many, they never take another step. They go to church occasionally, they might even read the Bible, but they never take another step to improve themselves. They're happy within their identity of saying, I'm a Christian, that's enough for them. And who am I to say what another person's journey is or isn't, or what it should or shouldn't be? I am somebody who knows that my journey requires a lot more. Have I done bad things in my past? Yes, I have. Do I regret them? Absolutely I do. Will I do things that some people might perceive as bad in the future? Yes, probably. But what I will try and do when that happens is understand what I've done, try and put it right where I can, and move on from that experience, having learnt from it, and try to be a better person. What I've also found is that having been on that road and identifying as a Christian, I have started to change as a person. I've become more empathetic. I now read newspapers and look at disasters, and I think deeply about the issues for those involved in that, whereas before I never did. And when you open yourself up to empathy, you also open yourself up to pain in some ways. But that's not a bad thing, because the more we understand other people's pain, the more we are able to try and help, and the more we are able to understand ourselves. And we can put bitterness aside, we can put nastiness aside, we can have thoughts going forward as we do, as I do, and I'm quite happy to be called out on it, but I might read an article on social media and make a comment. I might go back and redo that comment because it wasn't particularly nice and I was just reacting to the headline. But what I'm saying is, just to summarise really, I identify as a Christian, and that identity is just the beginning of a journey that I am taking for myself. And I would encourage people to look at where they're at, look at their identity. And as a Christian, you aren't alone. Jesus is always with us. And it's given me much more focus on the positive things in life. And the more I help others, the more positive my outlook is. So good luck with your identity, whatever it is and whoever you are. Life is a journey. And God bless you all.